In life, we often find ourselves torn between what we truly desire and what we've been taught to choose. We're told realism is crucial. Without it, we risk delusion. But what if that mindset quietly reshaped the way you perceive possibility, what you believe you can achieve? Today, we're pulling back the curtain on how one simple phrase of "be realistic" can quietly rewire your ambitions and your identity. Welcome to the Glitch Cult, where we take you on a journey to confront the hidden truths and rediscover the voice you've forgotten to hear. Long before anyone encourages you to chase your dreams, someone quietly teaches you how to abandon them. Not through force, not through cruelty, not even through rejection, but through ordinary sentences that sound responsible, caring, and mature. Sentences that arrive early enough that you never question them. And among all of them, one appears more often than any other. Be realistic. At first, this idea does not feel like a limit. It feels like protection. It sounds like guidance. It arrives wrapped in concern, offered by people who believe they are preparing you for a difficult world. Parents say it when they worry about your future. Teachers say it when they doubt your chances. Relatives say it when your ambitions sound unfamiliar. Society repeats it until it begins to feel less like advice and more like a law of nature. What is rarely acknowledged is that most people who tell you to be realistic are not speaking from wisdom. They are speaking from experience, and not the kind of experience that expands vision, but the kind that narrows it. The kind that teaches survival instead of possibility. For many of them, realistic simply means the life they were able to build, the compromises they accepted, the dreams they adjusted until they fit inside fear, responsibility, and social approval. Without realizing it, they pass those adjusted limits directly into your mind. When a parent advises you to choose a safe career, when a teacher suggests you lower your expectations, when someone older says, "People like us don't do those things," they are not describing reality. They're describing the borders of their own life. Borders shaped by financial pressure, cultural rules, emotional disappointment, and often by silent regret. Because these messages come from authority figures, from people you trust, from people who claim to care about you, they bypass skepticism entirely. They do not arrive as opinions. They arrive as facts. And once they settle inside your belief system, they rarely announce themselves again. They simply begin shaping your choices from the background. This is where the first transformation happens. Long before any dream is tested against the world. Long before any real obstacle appears. Because being realistic becomes the moment you begin editing yourself. Filtering desires before they are spoken. Lowering ambitions before they are examined. Adjusting curiosity to match what seems acceptable. In that moment, without any dramatic failure, without any rejection, without any visible loss, you learn something far more dangerous than disappointment. You learn how to belong by becoming smaller. Society reinforces this lesson everywhere, not through open suppression, but through systems that reward predictability and discourage deviation. Through schools that train obedience more efficiently than imagination. Through career paths that value stability over exploration. Through cultural narratives that celebrate success only when it follows approved routes. Slowly, an invisible rule takes shape. Dreams are only respectable if they are practical. Ambitions are only valid if they are safe. Individuality is welcome only as long as it does not disturb the existing order. What is rarely questioned is why realism is treated as maturity. As if growing older naturally means growing narrower. As if becoming an adult requires abandoning curiosity, imagination, and risk. As if wisdom demands the rejection of everything uncertain. But realism is not a philosophy designed to help human beings reach their potential. It is a survival strategy designed to minimize danger. And survival strategies, by definition, are concerned with avoiding loss, not with discovering possibility. This is why the phrase feels comforting, because it offers safety, It promises protection from embarrassment, failure, and uncertainty. It reassures you that you are sensible, responsible, mature. But in exchange for that safety, it quietly asks for something enormous. Something most people never realize they're giving away. The freedom to explore who they might become. So the first betrayal does not happen when you fail. It does not happen when the world rejects you. It happens much earlier. In childhood, in classrooms, in family conversations, in moments when someone convinces you that dreaming too boldly is naive, that aiming too high is irresponsible, that wanting more is unrealistic. And from that point onward, before life ever gets the chance to tell you what is possible, you have already decided on behalf of fear, on behalf of conformity, on behalf of belonging, that what kind of future you are allowed to imagine. Once the idea of being realistic settles into your belief system, it does not remain a single piece of advice that you occasionally remember. It slowly becomes a permanent filter through which every desire, every ambition, and every future possibility is evaluated. Over time, this filter becomes so automatic, so deeply integrated into your thinking that you no longer recognize it as something learned. You experience it as your own judgment, your own intelligence, your own mature understanding of how the world works. At this stage, something subtle begins to happen inside the mind. Instead of asking what you want, what excites you, or what you might become, your brain learns to ask a different set of questions. Questions that sound rational, but are driven almost entirely by fear. What if this fails? What if I'm not good enough? Because these questions are framed as caution rather than anxiety, they are rarely challenged. They are accepted as sensible considerations, even though their true function is not to find truth, but to prevent discomfort. Psychologically, this is the moment when risk avoidance begins to transform into identity. The brain is designed to protect you from danger, and uncertainty, rejection, failure, disappointment are processed by the nervous system as threats, not intellectually, but emotionally. So every time you imagine a path that feels uncertain, the brain automatically generates resistance in the form of doubt, hesitation, and rational objections. And when you repeatedly obey those signals, your nervous system learns a simple rule. Safety comes from staying within familiar boundaries. Over time, this rule reshapes how you relate to possibility itself. Instead of seeing dreams as experiments, as directions, as questions to explore, you begin treating them as predictions that must be accurate before you are allowed to attempt them. And since no meaningful ambition can ever be guaranteed, the mind quietly eliminates most futures, not because they are impossible, but because they cannot be proven safe in advance. In this way, realism does not wait for reality to reject you. It rejects the future on your behalf before reality ever gets involved. This is where imagination begins to shrink. Not suddenly, not dramatically, but gradually through thousands of small internal decisions. Each time you dismiss an idea as unrealistic, each time you label a desire as impractical, each time you tell yourself the timing is wrong, the odds are low, the risk is too high. With repetition, the horizon of what you can even mentally conceive becomes smaller, safer, more conventional. Not because your potential decreased, but because your perception of what is allowed slowly collapsed. At this point, something psychologically dangerous happens. Logic begins to replace curiosity, not as a tool for understanding, but as a defense mechanism against fear. Instead of using reasoning to explore possibilities, you begin using reasoning to justify avoidance, to explain why you should not try, why others are more talented, why the system is unfair, why the odds are against you. These arguments feel convincing precisely because they are partially true. Every ambitious path contains uncertainty, competition, and risk. But the critical shift is this. Your mind is no longer asking, whether something is meaningful. It is only asking whether it is safe. This changes your relationship with failure itself. Instead of seeing failure as information, feedback, or learning, you begin treating it as a verdict on your identity. Something that would define you, embarrass you, expose you. And because the brain is deeply motivated to protect self-image and social standing, it adopts a very efficient strategy. Eliminate situations where failure is possible. The simplest way to do that is not to try, not to experiment, not to deviate, but to remain within paths that are already socially validated, institutionally approved, and emotionally familiar. As this pattern repeats, your sense of self begins to reorganize around caution. You stop seeing yourself as curious, ambitious, or exploratory, and begin identifying as sensible, grounded, realistic, responsible. These labels sound positive, but they quietly anchor your identity to stability rather than growth, to preservation rather than expansion, to protection rather than discovery. Eventually, realism stops functioning as advice and becomes an internal censor. A voice that intercepts desires before they fully form, that interrupts imagination before it unfolds, that reframes ambition into foolishness and curiosity into irresponsibility. And what makes this powerful is that the voice no longer sounds external. It sounds like you, like your own reasoning, your own conclusions. And this is the quiet psychological tragedy at the center of realism. By the time you believe you are thinking clearly and rationally, your mind has already been shaped to avoid the very experiences that could have expanded it. And without any collapse, without any dramatic loss, without any conscious decision to give up, you slowly become someone who no longer fails often. Not because you succeeded, but because you stopped placing yourself in situations where failure, growth, and transformation were even possible. In a world full of external voices, it's easy to lose the sound of your own. But your thoughts and your desires, they deserve space. When you sit quietly with them, without judgment, without being realistic, you let yourself truly listen. It's in these moments that you might catch a glimpse of the future you've been silencing. Because if you never pause, how will you know what you've truly wanted all along?